and welcome to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. In this podcast, we discuss mystical works of literature and how they relate to recovery. We hope you enjoy today's podcast episode.
Hello, this is Buddy C. Welcome to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. Today we have Brian and Drew and Lou and Oscar. Good to have you guys. We're going to be talking about the 77th verse of the Tao Te Ching. If you're new to the podcast, we talk about how the Tao Te Ching, which is the equivalent to the Chinese Bible, if you want to put it in perspective to the West. Here, most everyone knows what the Bible is. Many were raised with at least a big Bible, family Bible, on the coffee table. I remember that as a kid. We also had personal Bibles, went to church, that kind of thing. But at least people know what a Bible is. Now, if you were in China and you mentioned the Tao Te Ching, it would be an equivalent kind of thinking there. It's the second most published book in the world, just behind the Bible, or manuscript, you could say. We found, or I did anyway, that when I got into I practiced 12-step recovery, that this idea of the higher power was obviously a little different than what I was raised with. Some people, they equate it to the same, but for me, what I had wasn't working, so I had to be open to things that were a little different, a more inclusive higher power. And for me, the Tao Te Ching describes how it works. Is just a different way of naming the same thing as far as what I see in recovery. So you can go to buddyc.org, a lot of resources there. I'm going to just leave it at that. Check that out. If it's something there, there's a lot of things to help. Even if you've been in recovery for a while and you're not really struggling with your addiction, now for me, it's struggling with the real issue, which is me. That's the real issue. So that's what we mostly talk about. In the 12 steps, alcohol is only mentioned in the first and last step. That's it. And the first is only mentioned because you have to accept your powerlessness. And I thought the first step said I was powerless over alcohol and my drinking was unmanageable. That's how I saw it, even though that's not exactly what the words say. It says my life's unmanageable. So what we talk about is that unmanageability of life. I think that's the whole essence of the program, is realizing our unmanageability and seeing how to let go of all that stuff we can't manage. That's what the first 3 steps are about. And the rest of the program shows us how to do that. That's the kind of things we talk about. So even if you don't have addictive issues, if this can speak to you and help you to live a little better life, I think. At least that's the way that's what it does for me. All right, let's get going. 77th verse. Brian, why don't you read Derek Lynn for us first? We're going to read a few different translations and then discuss it.
Right, sure. The Tao of heaven is like drawing a bow. Lower that which is high. Raise that which is low. Reduce that which has excess. Add to that which has deficiency. The Tao of heaven reduces the excessive and adds to the deficient. The Tao of people is not reducing the deficient in order to offer to the excessive. Who can offer their excess to the world? Only those who have the Tao. Therefore, sages act without conceit, archive without claiming credit. They do not wish to display their virtue.
Thank you, Brian. So he's saying there's the Tao of heaven and the Tao of people. What Tao is the path or the way. You could say the Tao of anything. And we've discussed the Tao Te Ching is the book of the way of virtue, the path of virtue, Te being virtue, or compassionate living, the Tao of people versus the Tao of heaven. Oscar, you want to read us the Jonathan Starr?
Yes, I love to. Thank you. Heaven operates like the bending of a bow. The high it pulls down, the low it brings up. It takes from that which has too much and gives to that which has too little. The way of man is otherwise. He takes from that which is depleted and gives to that which has too much. Who can offer an abundance of the world? One who has Tao. Such a one can give like the heavens. The sage gives without relying on his own effort. He completes without waiting for reward. He illumines without stepping from the shadow. Thanks.
Thank you, Oscar. Drew, you want to read us Stephen Mitchell, please?
Sure. As it acts in the world, the Tao is like the bending of a bow. The top is bent downward, the bottom is bent up. It adjusts excess and deficiency so that there is perfect balance. It takes from what is too much and gives to what isn't enough. Those who try to control, who use force to protect their power, go against the direction of the Tao. They take from those who don't have enough and give to those who have far too much. The master can keep giving because there is no end to her wealth. She acts without expectation, succeeds without taking credit, and doesn't think that she is better than anyone else.
Thank you, Drew. It's from Red Pine that are jumping out at you this morning, speaking to you.
I thought there was, in Red Pine, he quotes, I'm not good at the Chinese pronunciations, Di Ching, and puts it pretty simply, I think. At least one part of it. It says, the way of heaven is to give, but not to take. The way of humankind is to take, but not to give.
Yeah, that's good.
And it's about that balance. It's like
Right.
the yin and yang. It's the balance.
I want to thank you, Lou, for putting me on to this Red Pine translation of the Tao Te Ching. There's some really good commentaries on some of these, some really simplistic, lots of views of this from very old teachers throughout history. The way of heaven is to give but not take. The way of humankind is the opposite, to take but not give. Isn't that always the case, though? That back to what we learn in recovery, that I'm relieved when I help you. Why in the world would that work? I have a different view of the airplane mask analogy. The way I look at that a little different than a lot of folks do. We're told to put on our mask first and help others, but the way I see it in recovery is a little different. If I help you put on your mask, my mask goes on automatically. Maybe it's when I'm helping you put yours on, you're helping me put mine on. I don't know. But if I focus on you instead of me, I'm always helped. It talks about the bow in this. Got to remember the Tao Te Ching was written, 2,500 years ago, we think? You see a lot of examples from nature. You see a lot of water, all kinds of things they had 2,500 years ago, including a bow. For a bow to work, it has to be perfectly balanced. And from what we read, if the Tao of people or the Tao or of what man does outside of following this way, we could look at it like, how about this? We're talking about two different ways of approaching life. What if I'm approaching from a foundation of fear versus a foundation of love or foundation of compassion, let's say? because love and action is compassion in my thinking, some form, some way I'm getting out of myself that, and those two, I think, are the difference. So if I'm approaching a situation from fear, I'm not looking to be balanced. I'm looking to pacify my fear. So am I going to think of how I can help you? No, I'm going to think about how I can help me. And even growing up, it was implied. I don't think it was actually taught, but I help me first and then I help you. Was the whole thinking behind everything. I don't donate to a charity when I don't have excess. Once I have excess, then I can donate. That's the whole thinking. Even in Christian circles, it it was implied that, you know, you did the right things, God blessed you, and then you blessed others, that kind of thing. I don't know if that was actually what was said or that was just what I heard. But here we see from the very beginning, there's a balance. You don't get a balance once you get to some point, but if you're learning to draw a bow, one of the first things you learn is the balance. So it pulls all excess to the middle, high and low, excessive lack or excessive gain, all comes to the center. And if I'm operating from a foundation of fear, I'm going to want to take the gain, or the fear is always there, maybe a way to say it. And I've said this before. If I don't have money to pay my bills, I'm going to have fear that the money's not going to come in. And if I ever have more money than I need, then I'm afraid I'm going to lose it. So the fear doesn't leave, it stays there. And I can't find balance when I'm sitting in fear because I always feel I'm lacking something. Oscar?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you started this session with the discovery that I recognized very much that I was the problem and not alcohol or drugs were the problem, but I was the problem. And in a way, you read it also in this first part of the verse. Nature or heaven, it says heaven, but it's nature actually operates like a bending of a bow. It's harmonious, it's in balance. Naturally, nature is always in balance. It it takes care of itself and it's always going to balance. So that's what nature does. And then it says what man does, and man does otherwise. And it creates this balance because he takes from that which is depleted, like man does. We take everything, yeah, like oil. When it's depleted, we still go on searching and we still want more and we need more. So it's on a huge scale that we do this, and we give to that which has too much. If you look at economics, it's so obvious. It's so obvious that we create disbalance, and we are the problem. So we are the problem by creating this disharmony. And it's so nice to read it like this. Okay, when I reflected to myself and to my recovery, I think, okay, a part of me is nature. So there must be balance somewhere within me. And when I find this, I'm in harmony. And I'm in harmony with the Tao, and I will find my balance. And sometimes I go a little bit that way and then a little bit that way. But I will always find the balance when I live and walk in harmony with the Tao. So the only thing that can disturb this is me. And that's my ego. So that's the way of man, is ego. And probably you're right that it's completely based on fear, 100,000 forms of fear and desire and the feeling we lack something and we need more. It's really an ego-based drive, which disrupts the harmony and the balance. So if we leave this ego alone and we don't listen to it, and that's what I learned actually in recovery, to leave my ego alone and leave it for what it is and don't take it seriously, then I will find the balance and the harmony. And then I'm able to help other people. Thanks.
Thanks, Oscar. Yeah, let's look at this, if we can, from a personal application. The way of heaven, even in a lot of meetings here, we say the Lord's Prayer at the end of the meeting. And when you say, if you're here and you say that, you say, Father who art in heaven. That word for heaven there does not necessarily mean something up here, like away from you, up in the clouds, whatever. It's the spiritual realm, is another way of looking at that. Another way you can translate that word for heaven. So maybe we could look at the way of heaven here somewhat the same, as in spiritually, being spiritually minded. So we've got two ways of thinking here. We've got approaching life from being spiritually minded, being from a foundation of love, from a place of helpfulness, versus the way of people, which would, Mitchell calls that those who try to control, ego, as Oscar was talking about. Yeah, Mitchell, that second stanza, those who try to control, who use force to protect their power, go against the direction of the Tao. They take from those who don't have enough and give to those who have far too much. Personally, that might mean I take from areas of my life. Instead of taking from areas of my life that have too much, I take from areas of my life that don't have enough. When I think I lack, what do? I start scrounging, when what I should be doing is the opposite. I should be giving. Drew?
When I was thinking about personal application for this, that's where I went with it, is what areas of my life am I giving too much attention to, and what areas of my life am I not giving enough attention to? And I can think of that in a couple of ways. One being, and this is what got me in trouble with addiction to begin with, is wanting those good feelings to last longer than was their nature to last, and wanting to avoid those bad feelings or get them done away with quicker than was necessary. So being afraid of the lows, being afraid that the highs won't be around forever, kind of being afraid of living in that middle, wanting to try to control, wanting to use force to make myself feel a way that in the moment wasn't natural, or to try to avoid feeling a way that in the moment was where my nature was going. And that's what often got me in trouble with addiction, was trying to control how I was feeling and making those feelings stick around longer than they needed to, or not letting the more unpleasant ones actually show up so that I could listen to them and let them guide me to a healthier place. And I also thought about what areas of my life am I giving too much attention to? What areas of my life am I not giving enough attention to? And I definitely know that I'm a really creative person, always have been. And that's something that I haven't been giving much attention to in my life is the creative part of my life, whether that's music or art or writing or anything like that. And that's one of those things where there's a little deficiency in that part of my life. What's getting the excess attention right now, and what can I reduce in order to give myself some more time to do that stuff that I really enjoy and makes life worth living for me. The activities that put me in that flow state where like I look down and realize that 4 or 5 hours went by and it just seems like half an hour went by. Those are the times in my life that I enjoy the most. So that's just a couple of ways that I look at the first couple of parts of this chapter.
Thanks, Drew.
My wife had such a beautiful question yesterday. She asked me and herself, what would your year look like if you knew it was your last year on Earth? So you then, in a flash, I recognized, okay, this is where I put my importance, where I invest my time and my money in. But would I do the same if I knew I had only 1 year to live? So it's a kind of funny way of looking at it with that perspective of the ending being nearer than we always think. Or at least I always think it's something far away. But what if it was not? Then I suddenly see the investments I make in my life and where I spend my time and money. And it's not exactly where I would spend it if I didn't have time, as far as you can speak of having time. Thanks.
Thanks, Oscar. Yeah, that goes to and this is a way that I can unevenly balance, is spending way too much time planning for the future rather than living in the moment. Living in the future rather than living in the moment may be a way to say that. That's part of what you're talking about, Oscar, I think.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. I want to read my interpretation of this one. I normally don't read mine that often, but this one I think really applies. Is verse 77. How to love yourself. Love works like drawing a bow, where high love brings down, where low love lifts. Where there's excess, love reduces. When there's deficiency, love replenishes. Now, when I say love, I'm talking about compassion. I'm talking about the act of love. The act of, for example, what do we learn in recovery about resentments? What do we do when we resent someone? One tool is we pray for them. That's 552 in the big book in the 4th edition. Talks about, I don't ask God to remove my resentment, as in something's going to poof, my resentment's going to be gone. It doesn't work that way. It has never worked that way for me. Even though I tried to make that work for years and years, it never worked. But what happens is I have to choose to practice compassion in place of my resentment or my anger, what's associated with the resentment. In other words, if I have difficulty with someone, I'll pray for them. I ask that they, all the good things for them. Do I think that poof, their life's made better? No, I don't think so. But I think what happens is I start changing because I'm starting to say, I want these good things for them. How can I be helpful to them today? I ask that all the things for them as if I were to pray for myself, thinking that my life would change by just praying. For me, it doesn't work that way. I make room for them in my life. And when I make room for them, I start making room for me. It's that practice of That's what love does. So when this says love draws, it's drawing me to the center. When I choose to be kind to you, I am drawing to the center. Brian?
Buddy, what comes up for me is step 3, and that's surrendering my will, because one of my character defects that I can, it's one of my worst character defects is envy, and I can struggle with that. I can compare your outsides to my insides and say, if I was just like this guy, or if I had XYZ like this guy, I would be okay. And man, that's not a place of contentment. And I have to, like Oscar said, like, just the ego, man, is, there's never freaking enough for it. It's just a bottomless hole. And as soon as you get to one level, you're like, well, if I can just get to that level, then I'll be okay. Trying to fill that God-sized hole. And to me, the goal is contentment, that I'm okay. What I have is enough, and what I have is enough for today. So this is a good verse. Thanks.
Thanks, Brian. Your comment reminded me of a verse in the Bible that describes the kingdom of heaven, which would be the kingdom of God, or the way of heaven, actually. You could say that. It says that the kingdom of God is not meat and drink. It's not the things that we see here. It's not the table, in other words, from Course in Miracles. It's not the table. It's righteousness, peace, and joy in the Holy Spirit is how the verse goes. So it's those elements of peace and joy that are seen as a result or as fruit of us living in that surrendered state that we learn in recovery. Lou?
Since we've started looking at this chapter, I've been thinking about stringing a bow and how hard it is. I don't know if you guys have done it or not, but when you don't know what you're doing, it's really hard to string that bow. Now, you go to somebody that's been at it for a long time, just real quick. They get the tension just right, and they just do it right. And so it's interesting to me, there's always this dichotomy, I think, at least for me, in following the way of some self-discipline or some work on myself, but at the same time knowing that it's really not that hard. We make it hard because we don't know what we're doing. I think it's the tradition of the 12-step programs to start people out right away in service, making the coffee or taking down the chairs or whatever. And I think that's tied into this too. It's part of the traditions to be of service and to find ways and to very early on in the program do that. And to have the sponsors that are the people that have strung the bow before, that can not tell you how to do it, but show you that it can be done. I guess I've just been thinking about that time, those first few times when I was trying to string a bow, and haven't done it, only a few times, but how difficult it was. I got to wrap your leg around it. You got to lift your leg up and pull down. I don't know where to go with that, other than what is easy for those who have worked on themselves and mastered and understand. It's not easy without some letting go of thinking that strength is going to do it or technique is going to do it, those kinds of things. So that's where I'm at right now with it.
Thanks, Lou. You reminded me of something. If you go to someone that's going to show you how to string a bow, they're not going to stand there and tell you how to do it. They're going to show you how they do it, right? You get a lot more out of watching them do it than you do out of them telling you how to do it.
Yeah.
It's the same. There's an element of that in recovery.
Yep.
I don't go to someone and say, okay, this is how you do it. I always say, this is how I did it. That's totally different. Totally, absolutely different. Thank you, Lou. That's good. I want to finish reading my interpretation of this, by no means a translation. The way of man, now we're to the way of man, is the opposite of what love does. Love draws in the excess, and where there's deficiency, it replenishes. The way of man's opposite, not comprehending how love works. Who is able to take what they have and give to those lacking? Only those who recognize the unlimited power of love. The sage surrenders to the power of love to meet the needs of others with no desire for credit or blame. In doing so, her self-love is beyond measure. That's always been my approach to self-love, or what do they call it? They have some words for that. The way I take care of myself is by asking, how can I take care of you? What I've always needed has been in my help of someone else. For me, I cannot recognize self-love just by doing things that would make me feel better. If that were the case, I wouldn't need you for recovery. If you look at the 12 steps, they're plural, and they're plural for a reason. The first step says, the first word of the first step is we. We admitted we were powerless. It didn't say I admitted I was powerless. And they're plural for a reason, is because I need you for me to recover. That's always been, it's okay to go take a day and do all the things that you like to do that make you physically feel better. That's great. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying that me taking care of the outside, making the outside feel better, never helped me with the inside. That's just me. I want to read this last stanza in these different translations just to see. This is the fruit or the result of allowing yourself to be balanced, to be pulled by compassion into a place of balance. In Star, the sage gives without relying on his own effort. He completes without waiting for a reward. He illumines without stepping from the shadows. All of that is living in this place of compassion, where it doesn't make sense that what I'm doing works. I was having a fear of financial insecurity. That's been years ago. That's not the last time I've experienced that fear, by the way, but one time, and it was coming on to Christmas, and I was really struggling with my fear of not having money to pay my bills. At that point, in my line of work, I either have a lot of money in the bank, a lot of zeros, or no zeros, or very little zeros. It's back and forth, or was at the time. So this is one of those times it was down, and it was coming up on Christmas. I said, okay, what I want to do is draw in when that happens. I knew, though, I needed to do the opposite. So I called my property manager. I had a few rental houses. I told him, I said, I want you to send a letter to all of my tenants. Actually, he was only managing 2 at the time. I had some others that I was managing. I said, send them a letter, tell them that I appreciate them being such a good tenant. I'm going to give them the month of December. This was all my steady income. It ended up being probably $3,000 or so, 2 to 3, something in there. I don't recall the exact number. And so I said, give them the month, and you're not going to bill me for managing for that month, right? He said, oh, no, I won't do that. I said, okay, we're going to give them the month of December, and sent them a letter, told them we appreciate them, even the ones that were shitty tenants. I did this for them too, right? Because you always got, not always, but at the time I had a couple you just had to pull on constantly. I sent them a letter. We appreciated them, blah, blah, blah. Enjoy your Christmas. I didn't tell my wife about it because she would have freaked out. She would have, that was not in her will. She She didn't understand that. I just kept that to myself. And I don't have anything to correlate with that. I said, oh, I did this in December and in February I got a check for X number of dollars. I didn't. Not one of those kind of things. But I recall that my attitude changed and my fear diminished when I chose to give. And I don't recall how I made it through, but I did. There was didn't lose anything, didn't file bankruptcy, none of that stuff. But it changed me. And that's what this drawing in does for me. Because the thing that pulls me, if you're talking about the bow, the thing that pulls me into balance is when I choose love over fear. That's what pulls and draws me. And that can be so difficult at times. So difficult not to choose to pacify my fear and choose to be kind when I'm aggravated or when I see the situation arising, or all the ways that I can allow my fear to control my life. And what do? I do what Mitchell said. I try to control. I use force instead. Brian?
I was thinking about my gratitude list that I do every day, and there's been many times that I've had to end something with a little affirmation. Thank you. It is enough. I had an order I was expecting, I don't know, a month or so ago, and it ended up being about a third. And immediately, man, like a switch, it was like a fuse broke, Why is it this? Why is it not that? That's what's going on in my head. And I just, man, I had just had to reel myself in and say, you know what? It's going to be enough. It already is enough. And yeah, that thank you, it is enough piece is something that I have to repeat over and over. And actually, I'll share this quickly. I don't know how this ended up in my YouTube feed, but I ran across an interview with Theo Vaughn. He interviewed the guy that, I guess the guy that started Craigslist. And he is the most chill, what I would consider rich guy. But just, it's a great interview. Some of the things that he said, one of the things he brought up was that his upbringing early on taught him to when enough is enough. And he told the story about being approached by some venture capital guys, and they're like, man, we can get you billions. And he said, I don't need billions. I don't need you guys right now. I've got millions or whatever. This is enough. And the crazy thing about this guy is he's 70 years old. He looks like he's 50. So you can tell he's walking the walk because he doesn't look like he's been rode hard and put away wet. He's obviously got some good genes and he's a pretty chill guy, but there was a lot of good content in there, man.
Hey, Brian.
That's where, go ahead.
When you say it's enough is not a place of lack, that's a place of balance. That's a place of the draw.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean, for me, when I hear enough, I used to mean, you say, it's enough, but I really would like more. Well, it's enough. That kind of thinking.
That's where I started out, to be really honest, while we're getting honest,
Sure.
and it's smoothed those edges over. It's that Dallas farmer, maybe it isn't. It's enough. It could be more, could be much less.
It's that place of balance, isn't it? That
Place of balance. Yeah.
Drawing. If you're drawing that back, the more tension you have, the harder it is to pull, right? The more, like, let's say, if you had more on one end, it would still have to pull in. Then the more you have, the harder it is to pull.
Yeah.
And that could be for negatives too. The more fear you have, the harder it is to pull. The more, whatever side of the spectrum you're looking at, whether it's high or low. It's
Yeah.
more to pull. So enough would mean I'm in balance.
Yeah.
Thank you for everything. I have no
Complaint.
whatsoever.
Yeah.
Everything is the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
To me, what struck me in that is no complaint. It's not complaints. Brian wants to have multiple complaints. So I had to narrow it down and make it singular. But I was laughing at what Lou said. Lou's kind of got that chill thing going on.
Okay, it's 3 months from 70. Is that what he said?
Yeah, 3 months from 70.
He's got those filters.
He's got that letting go down.
He's got his filters on his Zoom, though. I know he
Yeah.
does.
I've earned how I look. It's a hard way.
Yeah.
That's good. Thank you, guys. Let's see. Anything? Okay. I like the way Derek Lynn approaches the result, which is that last stanza. He says, and it's interesting, all of these results are point to the sage's character. The sage can act without conceit, doesn't have that hidden motive to be recognized behind what we're doing. Achieve without claiming credit. Oh man. Does not wish to display their virtue. You know, a lot of times when we start doing for others, there's always, for me, there's opportunities for those always. If I start shifting over and start recognizing my ego, I start wanting to take credit for things. I want to take credit. When I recognize, really it's backwards. For me, when I realize I want to take credit, I've already started going down that road, right? So I've got to back it up. Say, whoa, wait a minute. Why am I wanting to take credit? What's going on here? So I realize, I'm going to have to look at that, do what my sponsor would call a mini 4th step, which would be take a look at what fear I'm trying to pacify here and see what's behind that. Yeah. And that's not really, when I see that happening, granted, it's something I would rather not be doing, but it's not as if I'm doing something wrong because this is the process. I see it and I recognize, okay, I have some work to do. I don't beat myself up about it because it just is. And then I do the work if I want to be free of the fear. If not, I'm going to get more and more out of balance. And life is not going to draw evenly like it needs to. Oscar?
Yes, that's perfectly described how we are the problem ourselves, right? So we have to circle around. I am the problem all the time. But in recovery, we recognize, okay, we are the problem. It's okay. We can handle it. We can find our solutions. We have the tools. It's really beautiful. And the thing I wanted to say about this last stanza, that it's a kind of very, when I'm good in the flow, this is the way of sponsorship where it really, how it really, in my opinion, should be resolve itself or should be executed. So this last sentence is the sages gives without relying on his own effort. He completes without waiting for reward. He illumines without stepping from the shadow. And then you have the Saint Franciscus prayer, the step 11 prayer. In sponsorship, I just give through what has been given to me as it is given to me, without me being the giver. So it's God working through me, or the Tao. In this verse, it's the Tao working through me, and from there I give as good as I can in that moment. A really softening way of working with people and meeting people. It's really nice. It's really very friendly and loving. Thanks.
And you're the channel in that regard. And
Yeah,
that's the
exactly.
way the St. Francis prayer, I believe, phrases it.
Yeah, that's
channel
that's
of love.
yeah.
The pipe, I don't go to the sink when I want a glass of water and say, oh, this pipe did such a good job. I don't even think about the pipe. Think about the water, right? I never think I never think about how great the pipe is that's bringing the water. Do I? I never do that. I doubt you guys do either. It's always, oh, that water's refreshing.
Yeah, the water is lovely.
Yes. If we're right size, perfectly balanced and drawn, and the drawing, the bow is us. We're being stretched and drawn, or the bow and the string, ever how you want to look at it, but that's me being stretched. Yeah. Hmm.
And that stretch can be in either direction.
It has to be, doesn't it, Brian?
You could be stretched up, feeling less than, or you can have your ego deflated
And it's
and
not
be right sized.
not negative thing to be stretched, because
Can feel that way.
we have to be in this place, following the Tao or following this way of life, practicing the program, ever how you want to phrase it, is a place of being drawn and balanced. And that's what the steps do for me. They balance me. They help me recognize and surrender my fears that were keeping me low and drawing me up. And you could look at that as if I had any self hate, all of those things, because I came in the program with a lot of that. I've mentioned before, I remember riding down the road looking in my rearview mirror, just saying, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, over and over again. Then when I'd been sober about 6 months, I realized I wasn't doing that anymore. So what was happening? I was being drawn up. Now, on the other hand, my ego, my pride, my self-will, all those things that were on the other side of the bow, they had to all be drawn down. So this drawing of the bow is the process of recovery for me. And it's taking all those things and bringing them to a place of maximum use, because the bow is not useful unless it's balanced. So same with us. If the more balanced we are, the more we can be drawn and the more useful we can be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For me, having those feelings of being less than, but then up here, I've got a facade held up. Like I've got all the answers.
Yes.
I've got my shit together, walking around carrying that all day long.
What's the recovery about an inferiority complex? There's a phrase, there's like a saying in recovery, and I can picture the guy saying it that says it all the time, but I don't quite remember the phrase.
Is it like egomaniac with an inferiority complex or
That's
something
it
like
right
that?
there. Yes, that's it, Brian.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it. And isn't that it, though?
Yeah. Yeah.
I needed drawn from all directions, and I still do at times. If I'm not being useful, I say, what's wrong with me? I'm out of kilter in some direction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. It's real good. Anything to add, guys? So when I start seeing control, when I start trying to force a result, I am not allowing myself to be drawn. I have to surrender those things. Drawn is in the air, drawing the bow, pulling the bow back. I'm not being drawn and balanced. How do I know that I'm in a place of balance? I can take actions that don't have manipulation behind them. I start achieving things, not looking for how I can be recognized. I do not want my good works to be on display. I remember I was given to a podcast and they always told who gave in the at the end of the podcast. I said, I said, just say I'm doing this anonymously. So you want me to so he mentioned an anonymous gave. I said, hey, anonymous means nothing. Don't mention anything about me giving. Period. Because if they do something like that, I still can take credit for that. Well, I get a little bit out of that. It's crazy. Brian?
My wife was playing, and I think I've mentioned this a couple of times. My wife was playing tennis at a place in Memphis, and it is just a super nice facility that they built. And there's 2 sections, and these folks have their name, the whatever family posted on the side. And man, I was just looking at that, and I was like, they might be great people, probably are, but I was like, man, if I had that kind of money, like I'd want to have anonymous. And I always look for that when you'll see a plaque somewhere and it's, hey, these are the folks that wrote the big check. And I'll always appreciate when I see anonymous in there. Somebody's willing to do that and say, keep this between us. Or their accountant says.
I had a GoFundMe that I gave to throughout someone's partner was sick. Anyway, and I knew the guy doing the GoFundMe. And I said, I'm going to give this amount of money. And it was a pretty good amount of money. I said, but not only do I want to be anonymous out as far as what's seen here, I don't want them to know that I gave it. And he says, I can do that being I'm the one doing the GoFundMe. If they were doing the GoFundMe, they would see. He said, but they're not going to see it. I said, and I don't want you telling them either.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was drawn correctly. In that situation, I was good. Yeah. But I would have loved to have my name out there and show the big check I was giving, blah, blah, blah. I'm the one that likes to act like I don't want that credit, but really do. That's how my ego shows up. Oh, no, but I want to hear more, really. That kind of thing.
No, keep going.
That's enough talking about me. Let's talk about me some more. That kind of thing. This is a good one, guys. I had no idea this was going to come out of this today, as usual.
Yeah.
Any comments to add before we close? Y'all have a great week and hope to see you next week. Thank you. Hello, this is Buddy C. I wanted to make you aware of several recovery-related resources that I've posted in the episode description. These resources include a list of recovery podcasts, a free sober meditation app, daily recovery email, shared Google recovery calendars. Hope you put some of these resources to use and have a great week.
Thank you for listening to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends in recovery.